Live in the boonies, so cars mandatory. Yep, hear you. All right, so shall we get chatting here about borderline? This was the voted on topic last week. I apologize for me not getting to it last week. I had totally meant to, and then things got a little bit crazy, so I was not able to. I want to be very clear this evening. Anytime that I talk about something like this on stream, I always have to be very clear that this night and me talking about borderline tonight is not designed in any way for any of you to self-diagnose, okay, or for me to diagnose any of you. So I know most of you know this, but I can't do an assessment on you. I can't determine whether you have borderline. I can't, none of that stuff, okay? This is purely informational. It's kind of what borderline personality is. You get my therapist perspective on it. You can ask me questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about dialectical behavior therapy as well. But this is not to diagnose. If when you hear me talking about this, that if you feel like this speaks to your experience in some way, I would encourage you to go speak to a therapist about it. A psychiatrist, a couple and family therapist, a clinical psychologist, whoever, general practitioner even, although I would recommend going to somebody in the mental health field. They can do a full assessment and they can kind of offer up that diagnosis if it fits. So, if this does relate to your experience, that's totally okay. Like I said, you can't self-diagnose, so please remember that as I talk about this. He does, Kat, and I've actually heard of him. I have not had a chance to watch his videos yet, but I have heard of that. I've had people actually in stream talk about that, so I appreciate you reminding me of that because I definitely need to check that out. Marsha Linehan's got some stuff up on YouTube too, and she's kind of the person who's figured out dialectical behavior therapy and kind of started that whole thing. Already diagnosed. You can't stop me from self-diagnosing myself on top of medical diagnosis. Well, there you go. If you're already diagnosed, you're already diagnosed. That's right, Lemon. It was you. That's right. Thank you, Lemon. So I have not had a chance to watch those yet, but all right. Thanks, Gappy, for adding that extra disclaimer in writing. So yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm clear about that because I think it's important. Nope, I can't self-diagnose. That's not good. But again, it's okay to know diagnostic criteria because knowing diagnostic criteria can help you be informed about the way you talk to the practitioner you're working with. So if you're like, man, I learned about this, I've read a little bit about it, I'm worried that maybe this speaks to my experience. Can we do a bit of an assessment around that? A mental health practitioner would be happy to do that. So. All right, I can fly now. No problem, King. Katie Morton is another good YouTuber therapist. Sweet. Good to know. I sent you a link to the modular mobile CT unit. It saves a lot of costs. I'm writing it through an affiliate. Cool. Did you send that to me or did you send that to Bonnie, Nero? Okay, so what I'm thinking about how we can do this evening is I'm going to... Oh my God, Proto, 4 months. Proto, doesn't it feel like you just hit the 3 months? At any rate, Proto, thank you very much. Cheers. I appreciate the subscription. It means a lot to me. It means so much to me that you guys subscribe, let alone that. I just appreciate that you spend your time with me, but the fact that you subscribe means a lot to me as well. So thank you. Appreciate it, Proto. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the diagnostic criteria for borderline. We're going to go through that together so that all of you can have kind of a sense of what that is and how we make sense of it. I'll go through a couple other pieces of the DSM here. And then I will talk, we'll do a little Q&A. You can ask me anything that you want to know about it. And then I'll talk a little bit about dialectical behavior therapy and what that looks like and how that works. I'm going to talk very basic about it. And yeah, so just keep, ask me questions as we go along. Make sure that you ping me if you really want me to see what you're saying. But Yeah, I just would appreciate, as always, and I don't feel like I don't even need to say this, but let's be respectful in the way that we talk about this, because this can actually be a sensitive topic for some people. And borderline is a pretty heavily stigmatized mental health disorder, and even among therapists. And so I think it's really important for us to kind of keep that in mind and be respectful that this is something that really strongly affects people that are diagnosed with it, and it's something that I think is helpful for everybody to understand. So, I've heard that people with BPD are social chameleons and they adapt their personalities to people they idealize. So, Lemon, how do I protect my own identity without conditioning myself around the people in my life? It's a tough question for me to answer specifically, Lemon, because I don't know exactly how that presents for you. It would constitute therapy, obviously, for me to answer that, but I may be able to answer that kind of through the way that we go through this, Lemon, and if I don't, let's come back to it. I think a lot of people who are aware of mental health topics self-diagnose a lot regardless of demographic. It's kind of a problem. How can a therapist be educated in the field, be polarized about it? Well, the thing about borderline, Kuro, and this is, I feel comfortable saying this because I think it's a common experience. Working with people who are diagnosed as borderline can be difficult work because borderline is a pretty intense diagnosis, and it's one that it tends to affect people that are around the person who's diagnosed with it pretty significantly, and that includes therapists. And so sometimes the work can be difficult for reasons that will make sense as we go through tonight. And so it can be kind of, you'll hear therapists sometimes just because that's what you need to do, make jokes about it, but sometimes therapists are averse to wanting to work with it because it can be really difficult. And again, not difficult in a way where I'm judging people that have it. It's just, it's not always easy to work with. So that's kind of where that can come from. It's certainly, there's a difference between working with and through borderline and, say, generalized anxiety, for example. Hello, M-Dash. It's pretty rad that you stream every night. Thanks. Yeah, I like it. It's my self-care. Somehow there were conflicting opinions about the diagnosis itself. No, Karu, it's mostly just like the actual work. Ever come across therapists with BPD? Yeah, Neuropilot. Actually, Marsha Linehan, who created dialectical behavior therapy, is diagnosed borderline. And she's very open about that. And that's part of why she developed it, was to help people like her. And here's the thing. What's up, Gerbo? So as I talk about this, one of the things that I want to say up front about it that I think is really important for everybody to know is that borderline actually has a really, I never know what word to use with this. The prognosis for borderline is pretty good in the sense that, like, one of the hardest parts about borderline is getting a person who has borderline to acknowledge and accept that diagnosis, which again will hopefully make sense here in a minute. But that dialectical behavior therapy is actually pretty successful in working with it, and people can live really healthy, productive lives with meaningful, fulfilling relationships diagnosed borderline. And I think that's really important to know and to keep in mind as we go through this. Okay? I actually didn't know that, Bonnie. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, positive prognosis feels like a weird thing to say, and maybe that's my own thing, Kuro, but like it's something that it's something that can actually be managed very well. And sometimes we lose sight of that when people are talking about how difficult it is. So that's kind of why I want to make that point. Okay, so let's go through the diagnostic criteria together, because I think that's going to set the stage a little bit for how we talk about this and questions that come from it. Isn't it 50% chance of recovery after 2 years of CBT? I don't know. Well, one, I don't know what recovery would constitute, because I don't know that this is necessarily a thing that you recover from so much as something that you learn to manage really well. And I don't know. I don't know the statistic on that, Lemon. I know that dialectical behavioral therapy is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy, so there's that. But Manage, yes, manage, absolutely. 2 years, I don't know. I think it depends on the person, to be honest, Lemon. And like I said, the hardest part often is the acceptance of that. What's up, Gasso? Welcome in. All right. So, important thing to remember here when anytime we're talking about diagnostic criteria is kind of the understanding of the context. What's the difference between BPD and multi-personality disorder? Lyrid, multi-personality disorder is talking about a person who has kind of a sense of many different personalities. By borderline is not, doesn't really have to do with multiple personalities so much as it is kind of like one person who's struggling with like abandonment and stuff. Yes, it's actually part of the diagnostic criteria, Lemon. So, Noodle has another front page day today. Thanks, Gasso. Appreciate you telling me. Good for her. That's awesome. I'm excited for her. She's growing big time. She's a great channel. So, I'm glad to see that she's growing as much as she is. Dialectic, as in dialects. Yes, I'll talk about that here in a second. What is borderline personality disorder? So glad you asked, nobody. That's what we're going to talk about here. Okay, so it's right here. Okay, it's a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image, and affects and a marketed impulsivity beginning in early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts as indicated by 5 or more of the following. All right, so oops, going the wrong way. Okay, so in order for a person to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, they have to meet 5 of the following criteria. So one thing that's important to note is that, so there are 9 criteria. A person doesn't have to have all 9 in order to fit. You would have to demonstrate 5. And it's often over a extended period of time. So borderline is not something that's acute. It's not something that you just, for 1 week you had really unstable relationships and all of a sudden you're diagnosable as borderline. This is something that it goes over a long period of time. It emerges. There's patterns to it. It can kind of be assessed over months, years, that sort of thing. So this isn't something that you just, boom. Can it be a standalone illness? I've heard it encompasses PTSD, depression. It can be comorbid with those things, Lemon. Frantic, is that a clinical term? Well, this is where assessment is part of what we need to do here. So, how is relationship defined? As 2 people, space between 2 people, Coder. It doesn't have to be intimate relationship. It can be friends, family, acquaintances, coworkers, intimate relationship, doesn't matter, okay? So, I'm going to go through each of these individually and kind of talk about them individually, and certainly feel free to ask questions as I go through this, okay? So, diagnostic criteria 1 here. Frantic efforts, and again, this is not for anybody to diagnose themselves, okay? This should be done with the assistance of a professional mental health practitioner, okay? Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. This is one of the core, I think this is why this is diagnostic criteria 1, because this is at its core, borderline. People who are diagnosed with borderline have an intense fear of abandonment. That the people around them, the people that they love, even people that they don't love, that they are destined to leave them in some way. Part of this is because borderline can be often correlated or connected with a chaotic attachment style, which very briefly, a chaotic attachment style is basically a sense that caregivers are not reliable and they're actually that they can be harmful. And so a lot of times people who have borderline have some form of abuse or trauma in childhood from their caregivers, because a chaotic attachment style is basically this person who loves me, who is supposed to take care of me, also hurts me. And so then you get this association between harm and connection. And you can imagine that that's a really chaotic thing, right? Like when you're growing up and all of a sudden you have maybe a parent who beats you up, but then also says, I love you. That's a really confusing message to get as a child. It's also common for people who are borderline to have parents who were diagnosable as, I keep saying bipolar, borderline. People with borderline who are to have parents who are diagnosed with borderline. So, would my friend with BPD's constant saying, it's fine, you should tell me I suck, or just say shut up to me, as well as claims of having no friends while talking to his friends. Are you saying would that constitute that, Sammy? That would be a common way that this could come out. Can people with BPD cope with feelings of abandonment by cutting ties with someone the moment uncertainty happens? Yes, that is very common, Lemon. So one of the ways that one of the frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment is for the person to abandon first. And so we don't know if there's a genetic component, Minato. It's more of a nurture thing as opposed to a nature thing from our current understanding of it. Yeah, so a frantic effort can often be abandoning a person first. So if it's basically what happens is, this is kind of my therapist perspective here and kind of how you can understand it clinically, is what happens is a person with borderline will often, for lack of a better word, latch on to certain people. And so what they'll do is they will sort of idealize a new person in their life that comes in that they seem to get along with. They'll heavily idealize that person. And they'll say things to that person like, wow, like you're really great. I've never had a friend like you. You're really wonderful. I really appreciate that you're always there for me. It means a lot to me that I can confide in you in the way that I can confide in you. They do this thing where they will really kind of build that relationship up because that relationship means a lot to them. And if you're afraid of abandonment and you have a nice relationship, what you want to do is hold on to it. Okay? One of the issues that happens is that idealization builds up over time. And inevitably, as in all human relationships, inevitably that person will do something that violates the idealization or will let the person down. And when that happens, for the person with borderline, that represents the potential for abandonment. And so that sends them into this intense amount of anxiety and franticness. And one of the ways that they may negotiate that is to say, well, fuck you then. Or they will dysregulate in some way. And will then and this is where the whole mantra of like, I hate you, don't leave me, comes in. Okay? What if somebody doesn't put themselves into a relationship in order to avoid those abandonment issues altogether? That's certainly one way that a person can do that, Bonnie. It would, if it was indicative of borderline, other forms of others of these criteria would have to be present. This isn't, you can't just say that a person has borderline if they are only having frantic efforts to avoid abandonment. It's not a fair attribution. Okay, it has to have some of these other criteria here. I had a friend who used to casually say to me when she was having maybe difficulties with her friendships, like, I cut off my friendship with this person. And I always wondered how she could just casually do that. I think she latched onto me for a time. Certainly, M-Dash. Again, that's a common way for people to do it. Totally describe my instant response to any problems with people. Yeah, so there you go, Lemon. Wish I could have heard this years ago when I was dating somebody with BPD. That relationship was very challenging, if I'm being honest. Having some of this knowledge certainly could have smoothed some things over for me. Yeah, Johnny, that's a common experience. It's difficult. Sure, Sammy, and that's why this needs to be done with a mental health practitioner. Okay, so that's one. Okay, so the frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. That's a really important distinction that, like, sometimes the abandonment is real, right? Sometimes people are ending their relationship with the person. Other times, people think that others are abandoning them, but that could be a form of cognitive distortion in the sense that, like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, hey, I just wanted to hang out with my other friends this weekend. That doesn't mean that I'm never going to hang out with you again. It just means that I have other friends I want to hang out with. Well, for somebody who has borderline, that could be an incredibly difficult thing to hear and synthesize. Because if a person says, well, hey, you know what, this weekend I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go hang out with these other friends. But thanks for the invite. For a person with borderline, that represents a potential abandonment. And again, that just jacks anxiety and it jacks emotional regulation. It sends a person into emotional dysregulation. So that's part of it, okay? 2, a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships categorized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. So this is kind of what I'm talking about here, right? So idealization, building the person up, building a relationship up. Sometimes this comes in the form of isolation, but it doesn't have to, okay? But like, wow, you'll hear things like, you're the best. I've never had anybody like you. You're so different. Your relationship with me means so much to me. And quick tidbit, people with borderline often will pair up intimately in intimate relationships with narcissists. And it's a terrible combination. But because narcissists eat this idealization up. Okay, so if you're a narcissist, all you want to hear is how awesome you are. And so a borderline person will tell you how awesome you are constantly. Okay, so that's a whole nother thing. But the devaluation is then, it's the, well, fuck you then, that happens. Like, well, this person's so horrible. Well, this person just, one weekend they go somewhere else and, like, how could you possibly do that to me? Okay. What's the threshold between people displaying cognitive biases and distortions, having there be a need to utility and pathologizing those behaviors? I think, Zoiku, like with any pathologizing or with any diagnosis, it's the extent to which that causes distress in a person's life. So we all have various cognitive distortions, but if that starts to impede on relationships and functioning, that's where we have an issue. What's a narcissist? A narcissist is somebody who is all about themselves, which is often deeply rooted in oh my God, why did the word escape me? Holy crap. You guys, I can't believe I just lost the word. Being a narcissist is deeply rooted in insecurity. Holy cow. I haven't hit the wall, I promise. Insecurity, but it's a me, I'm the best. What is someone who self-diagnoses themselves with a disability in order to gain sympathy or acceptance with an idealized person count as a symptom of BPD? It could, Lyrid. That would fall under frantic effort. Absolutely. Like, yeah, no, you can't leave me because, because I have this thing. Right? Yes, absolutely that could be the case. What's up, Miss Pikachu? Thank you for the follow. I've read there can be a good side to BPD where you can get a hold on it. You become very perceptive to the feelings of people around you. That's true, Lemon, and that's part of why the prognosis for this is so strong and why it's good. It's just a person kind of has to accept that first. All right? So, unstable and intense. Intense being an operative word. Okay? Within interpersonal relationships, alternating between idealization and devaluation. I hate you, don't leave me. Any insight on a person who self-diagnoses in order to become more accepted in a community? Would it would depend, Gappy. I'd have to know the person to be able to give you any meaningful insight on that. All right, 3, identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image and sense of self. Okay. Oftentimes, the way that this will present itself, criteria 3, at least in my experience, and in the experience of people I've talked to about this, is that a person will define themselves relative to the people that are around them, and that can get really dangerous because if you put all of the stock in who you are into the opinions and the perceptions of others, you lose who you are. So, for example, if I put all of my identity and who I am into the way that all of you describe me, that would be that could be one issue. So like if all of you were sitting here saying like Dr. Mick's stupid, Dr. Mick doesn't know anything about what he's talking about, Dr. Mick's a fraud, yada 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 yada. If you were all saying that stuff and I didn't have any sort of self-image, I might believe it and I might go with it, and then I might get like really polarized against all of you, and it might feel really toxic towards myself because of what you're saying. Conversely, if all of you embraced me and idealized me and thought I was the most wonderful thing in the world, I might use that to identify myself. But this disturbance and instability of self-image and sense of self, again, is just one person, like error is just one piece of criteria here. Okay. No solid foundations to who you are. That's a cool metaphor, Lemon. Are there other forms of narcissism? Like I only care about me, I don't act that way, but the only person on this planet I care for is me. I still function normally, save for being careful of honesty, caring about others. I don't like attention, hate being recognized. Just curious about your insight on it. I know humans are complex and don't fit in. So, Fame, it depends on the person, but narcissism is often like a intense need to be constantly adored and appreciated. There's often like they will blame others for everything instead of taking any sort of accountability that might suggest that they're fallible in some way. They often like being recognized. Maybe I'll put narcissism on the mental health topic night, Fame, and maybe we can talk about that one night. Would 5 or more of these criteria have to happen all at once or over a period of time? So, Bonnie, they sort of have to exist together-ish. They could be over a period of time, but as a therapist, what I'm looking for is, do these things exist and are they consistent and part of this? Okay, maybe not acute, if that makes sense. Okay. Hearing that phrase, I hate you, don't leave me. By the way, what's up, Bloody? Reminds me of a couple abuse victim. Could there be any relation between BPD and someone in a couple abuse situation that they love the person but don't want to leave? It's not a silly question at all, Bloody. Could there be any relation between BPD and someone in a couple abuse situation? Yes, absolutely, Bloody. Absolutely. Mods, watch Jeffrey, please. How do you think BPD applies to high-functioning people like surgeons who are more about being idealized or an intense instability in their interpersonal interactions? That's a hard one for me to answer, Neuro. Because you could be high-functioning and have borderline. So it's hard for me to make like a sweeping statement about that, Neuro. I don't know if maybe you have like one way to maybe narrow that down. It's less about a person's functioning and more about a person's like ability to relate. I just get called that a lot because of how cold I am to others, how much time I spend. I'm sorry to hear that, Fame. I mean, I can't say either way whether you are or not, but I am sorry to hear that you hear that from people. A lot of criteria fit into other diagnoses. Are there any other common misdiagnosis for BPD? You'll see it with like bipolar, major depression. I'll go through the comorbidity, Lyrina. Absolutely. Karuo, I'm not sure what you're referring to, but let me know if because I missed that. Narcissism can originate from high self-esteem as well as low self-esteem. Any insight into dealing with narcissism originating? So Zoiku, I appreciate the question. I'm going to keep it with borderline tonight. But I appreciate all the questions about narcissism. Like I said, I'll put narcissism on the list. We can maybe talk about narcissism on another mental health topic night. So I don't mean to shut you down, Zoiku, but I don't want to get too in the weeds with narcissism and then lose talking about borderline. Is there such thing as mild BPD? It's a good question, Insanity, and I don't know that it would be like a term that would be used. I think a person could say, I think the way that it's normally said is like a person has borderline tendencies, but I don't know that, like, mild might be somebody who's managing it well, is probably the best way that I could answer that. Is there any idea for autism being a discussion in a future stream? I can certainly put it on the list, Bloody. I would love to have somebody on who is more of like an expert in working with autism that could talk about it, Bloody, but that's a topic that I would love to have somebody, like, to interview somebody about. Okay. Impulsivity in at least 2 areas that are potentially self-damaging: spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. This is pretty self-explanatory, I think, right? This is where, Lirina, I think what you were asking me, this is where this fits in, is like spending, sex, substance abuse, being reckless in those areas are often also indicators of mania. And so for a person with bipolar, if they're having a manic episode, sometimes these are things that are present there. And so this is where kind of comorbidity and smoking cigarettes count. It could, I guess, if you were chain smoking them significantly, Bonnie. What game is this in the background? This is Journey. Deft. This is why I picked Journey, because it's kind of a nice, calming soundtrack to have in the background. I'm not really playing it much. I'm just kind of leaving it, but that's okay. So, is there a psychologist with autism who might be interesting? He streams. Cool. If you could give me his contact information, Neuro, I'd love to do a collaboration or something. But yes, Bonnie, that smoking cigarettes and chain smoking them could absolutely count. Drinking, binge drinking, right? Binge eating, all that stuff. Okay, recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures or threats, or self-mutilating behavior. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes with people who are borderline, using suicide is a means to try to get people not to abandon. So I will kill myself if you leave. That is manipulative. A common stigma about people who are diagnosed with borderline, by the way, is that they are manipulative. I hesitate to say that they're manipulative so much as they're frantically trying to mitigate abandonment. That can be manipulative. Using suicide to hold people into relationships is absolutely manipulative and not okay. And unhealthy coping mechanism sort of falls under this, although you have to see this, right? Do not include suicidal or self-mutilating behavior covered in Criterion 5. Is not included in the recurrent, like, that's not part of the impulsivity. Okay, but suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, intense ideation, etc. So okay, sorry, I was checking something in chat really quick. Affective instability, affective meaning like emotional instability due to a marked reactivity of mood, intense episodic dysphoria, irritability, or anxiety, usually lasting a few hours and rarely more than a few days. So again, this is where, like, you're just all over the place emotionally, and a lot of times the emotional experience is relative to those around and is in reaction to. So, and sometimes it's the perception of what's actually happening for the other people around, and sometimes it's a perception that's misguided or projected. The whole threatening suicide thing wasn't really a conscious thing, more of a panic response. It was terrible and I'll regret it forever. Well, give yourself some patience and compassion, Sammy. I mean, it's, I struggle with making people feel bad about that, because in the moment you're just doing what you can. And I think realizing it at some point, particularly when you're an adult, right? Like when you're young, you get a little bit more of a pass on it, but like as an adult, just to like sort of realize that and think about like, okay, what could I do instead? I think that's the important part. So I hope you're not too hard on yourself for that, Sammy. I appreciate you sharing that, though. It can include intense intrusive thoughts, Lemon, often thoughts about I'm being abandoned or something related to that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just wanted to take a sec, say I think you're a pretty good guy and all that you're doing to help others. Thanks, Bloody. I appreciate that very much. I'm just glad you're here. Happy to help in whatever way that I can. All right. Chronic feelings of emptiness. Emptiness is a very difficult thing to quantify. So I know, Karuo, you had asked about this, and kind of we're talking about, I think it was you, Karuo, that said, how do you quantify this stuff? And this is one that's really hard to quantify. This is something that people will kind of talk around. They might say they feel empty. It's kind of this like pit in your stomach, or a sense of apathy or not feeling fulfilled by various relationships. Yeah, Minato, apathy. No sense of purpose. So that's kind of what that is. Inappropriate, intense anger, or difficulty controlling anger. Inappropriate is, I sort of struggle with that word. Inappropriate meaning like doesn't really logistically make sense based on the context. This is something that this is why an outsider's perspective is really helpful here, where you might look at like an outburst or a devaluation of a person, again kind of going up here to criteria 2, that inappropriate response is like wow, that was really intense, like where did that come from, is the kind of thing where you'd be like ooh, help me understand that was really really intense. Again, often it's a fight or flight response to the fear of abandonment. I told my husband that when we were dating I would probably kill myself if it left me. I wasn't using it as a way to keep him with me because I wasn't threatening to leave. It was just the truth because of my first successful relationship and one of the only reasons living at the time. I'm glad you don't feel like that anymore, Insanity. And again, that's where, I mean, it gets nuanced. Like, you know, if it's a statement of fact, that's different than a statement that tries to get another person to organize themselves in some way or engage in some way, right? So intent is something that absolutely matters. Hey, Chief. Can I link a picture that best represents my own emptiness? Sure, Lemon. I would give you permission to do that, absolutely. Regardless of how common... So if a mod can give Lemon a 30-second buffer to post a link, that's cool. All the symptoms sound like they could be part of something else. How could a therapist know that it's really BPD compared to something that just looks like BPD? So that's a really good question, Bloody. So, first of all, yes, some of these can be due to... You can see it be comorbid with something like generalized anxiety, PTSD, major depressive disorder, bipolar. The thing about this is these get clustered. Sorry, I keep running my mouse over this as if you guys can see it. You can't see it. These get clustered. So what we're looking at is how do we have 5 of these criteria that are sort of together? And really the major marker here that is for I as a therapist, what that's going to do and what's really going to kind of set me off that I have to think about this as potentially being borderline is really this piece. Okay, the abandonment piece and also the idealization and devaluation of people. Oops. Okay, so these are the 2 pieces that are really going to indicate, they're going to make my therapist brain go, maybe. Okay. Thank you, Sammy. Man, Twitch chat getting brutal tonight. Sorry, guys, about the insurgents, but that's why we have awesome mods. Hey, can I get a quick cheers for the mods? Thank you, mods, for being so awesome and for being here. I appreciate it very much. Sure can, Karuo. Absolutely. All right. So, sorry, wait, Karuo. Can splitting happen? Splitting is a big one when you have 2 images of someone in your mind. Yep, and that's where we're going to get into talking about dialectics here in a second. I was beat as a child, and I do think about suicide once or twice a day. Even the small things make me want to end my life. I'm really sorry to hear that, Goat. I hope that if it ever moves you to a space of wanting to act upon it, Goat, I hope that you'll call a hotline or that you'll talk to somebody. Because I say this when I go offline every night, but I'll say it right now, like, you matter. Your experiences are absolutely valid. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I'm glad you're here for whatever it's worth. Like, it means a lot to me that you're spending your time with me and with us and that you could say something like that. And that you feel comfortable enough saying that with us. We totally hear you on Because it's pretty activating, Gappy. Mental health is still a thing in the United States that is activating for people that people don't quite understand, and they stigmatize and they like to make fun of people. And there's some nasty people out there, and the anonymity of the internet makes it even easier. So it's all good, K-Girl. It's all good. How often do you observe that the memory of people presenting with BPD often lack all the experiences between the highs and lows? That's a really good question, Zoiku. I think people tend, with borderline in particular, will tend to fixate more on the polars, right? On the really good and on the really bad. And that's part of what dialectical behavioral therapy is to try and get people back to the space in between. So I would say it's pretty common. Maybe Dr. Mick could weigh in on the metaphor. Which metaphor? What? Sammy, I missed the metaphor. Can you type it to me again? Is memory loss common in BPD? I don't know, Lemon, to be completely honest with you. I think maybe some selective memory, potentially. You might have memory loss related to a trauma. I could certainly see that being the case, Lemon. I want to talk to my doctors about depression. I was told 3 doctors to talk to someone else. God, that makes me so bummed out, Goat, to hear that you've had that experience. I'm really sorry you've had that experience. If you live in the United States, Goat, on the Discord channel, I have a mental health resources tab that might be able to get you in touch with somebody who would totally be willing to talk to you about that. I'm really sorry that you've had that experience. It totally sucks. I hate that so much when people tell me that stuff. Sammy, just send it to me on Discord. I'm fine with that. By the way, for anybody who's wanting to watch me progress in Journey, sorry I'm not. I forgot that this part is taxing enough that like it would take away from me being able to talk about this. So we'll just listen to the music and have the nice, like, calm, chill vibes. I'm sorry to hear that, Fame. That sucks. What's up to Jennifer? Here for a bedtime lurk? Cool. Glad you're here, Jennifer. So it couldn't be affecting short-term memory. I'm constantly feeling like it jumped from Monday to Friday. I mean, I don't know. It could, Lemon. I just don't know that I could make a general statement related to that. I grew up with people who have BPD diagnosed, medicated, so I have some experience and observations, just not any formal training. Cool. Well, hopefully this kind of helps you make sense of it in some ways, Oiku. After a traumatic time, I did wish for amnesia in order to forget about it all. Instead, I became super forgetful, but I still remember the trauma. Thanks, life. Trauma sucks, man. Trauma is brutal on the brain. That would maybe be a good topic to talk about someday as well. They didn't want to do anything because it's long progress. I learned to deal with it myself, but I've been through some rough times lately. But being here tonight, I want to go see someone again. Well, Goat, to whatever way I can encourage you to do that. I just want to say, I know it's hard. I know it can be demoralizing when you've been sent multiple places. And I think it's awesome that you want to talk to somebody again. And I, for whatever it's worth, Goat, I totally hope that you do. And I would love to be able to help you in whatever way I can with that. Like like on Discord, we have resources available. But more power to you. Cheers to wanting to do that. It's not easy, and I give you credit for that. What's up, Pime? Probably have no alert because of streamer mode. Good point, Sammy. Symptoms of mental illness are like... Yes, that is a really cool metaphor, Sammy. I like it a lot. Reading it. I don't mean to derail too much, but what is the soda you're drinking? It's key lime LaCroix, Lyrid. If any of you watch Lobro Watch, next time you watch him, tell him that key lime LaCroix is the best and that Dr. Mick told you to say that. Okay, let me pull this back up here. Outside of my own BPD, I've noticed stress tolerance has been heightened by my own stress, so that actual stressful situations I can keep my head and stay calm. Yeah, that's common, Lemon. All right. So again, 5 of these have to be present in order for a person to be, at least 5. Okay, have to be diagnosed that in order to be diagnosed. And it has to be over a prolonged period of time. Okay, and the therapist sort of has to work with you on that. So I think this is an important piece here, okay, for the diagnostic features. Thank you, Jennifer. Have a wonderful evening. I know he'll fight me, nobody. I'm fine with that. That'd be a good stream one day. Me and Lobro fight. Maybe he and I should play the new Mortal Kombat and fight for LaCroix. All right, the essential feature of borderline personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image, and affects, and marked impulsivity that begins by early adulthood and is present in a variety of contexts. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Okay, so perception of separation or rejection, loss of external structure can lead to profound changes in self-image, cognition, and behavior, and often leads to the person trying to initiate the abandonment first. If I abandon you, you can't abandon me. Or sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where a person thinks that they absolutely will be abandoned. They've come to expect that they will be abandoned. And so as a result, their franticness and their desire to hold tight but then devalue will make a person leave, because people don't want to put up with that. And people who have arguably healthy boundaries will set boundaries with a person who has borderline. And for a person with borderline, having boundaries set on them is a really threatening thing, because a boundary represents a space, and a space represents potential abandonment. And so what I'm looking for as a therapist commonly, and what a lot of therapists who work with this are looking for, is a person's emotional experience and the way that they're making sense of the world and their relationships constantly being filtered through the fear of abandonment and a sense of abandonment. How do I mitigate abandonment? If that's the case, we're going to start looking at some of this other stuff. I've been in and out of therapists lately and all my life, and I have had more therapists than I have fingers and toes. And lately I've been debating if I want to give therapy a try again. But I just feel like it'd be a waste of energy and gas, since no therapist has really been able to help me. Sorry to hear that you haven't had a experience so far, Bloody, that has helped. Bloody, you've probably been through all this before, but this feels worth posting here. I do have a video out there about how to find a therapist and certain questions you can ask to try and make sure that a therapist is a good fit. I would encourage anybody here to watch that if you're curious. I think it could be helpful. Hello, Humune. Putting a wall up. Why? Is it me? Am I that awful? Do I need to accept I'm awful? There you go, Lemon. Lemon, by the way, I just want to say thank you for sharing so openly about your experience. I really do appreciate it. It's cool that you're willing to share that with all of us. And what you just wrote is a beautiful example. It could be the healthiest boundary in the world. It could be a boundary that 10 out of 10 people would look at and say, yes, that's totally what you should have done. You should absolutely set that boundary with that person. And that person will still probably internalize that as being something that they've done wrong. And it may not even be that. But again, it's a fear of abandonment. What about expecting people to leave? I never experienced... Yeah, so again, expecting people to leave is expecting people to kind of, abandon is leave being maybe a synonym for abandonment, goat. But yes, if that expectation of people leaving leads to significant emotional dysregulation and a lost sense of self, then we're looking at potentially something that could be an issue. Well, I'm grateful that you do, Lemon. Seriously, it's awesome. Do you think 2 people with borderline can have a healthy relationship? That's a good question, Bonnie. It's a really good question. I think they could if they both acknowledged that they were diagnosed with it. Because you would need to know the way that was going to play out. Because, Bonnie, essentially what you're doing in that instance is you're putting 2 people that have a chaotic attachment style together. And so that is going to probably feel like just chaos at times, because one person's need for closeness might stir up the other person's sense of abandonment and harm. Like, that's a really difficult combination. So it's not that it couldn't happen, Bonnie, but I don't know that I would say that it's particularly likely. The more likely one is borderline narcissist. Those are the one. That's the one that gets wrapped up together more often than not. Can you define sense of self? So, Karuo, the way I like to think about this, I'm going to borrow from internal family systems when I talk about this. Sense of self is, if you think about the voice that filters the voices in your head. So it's sort of like it's the part of you, or it's the thing that calls upon the voices. It's the thing that is you have all kind of the chaos of what it is to have human cognition in your brain. I like to think of sense of self as, do you understand the thing that listens to those voices? I don't know if that makes sense. It's a very abstract way to think. The self is a very abstract thing. It's kind of like the conductor of the orchestra. But it's who's listening to the cognition. Who's the one who is... wow, so you actually beat me to it there, Karu. It's also like, who's the person that acts on an emotional impulse, right? Who's the person that has the sensation of a thing? It's all right, Darth. You can catch the video on demand. I'm glad you're here now, Darth. No need to feel bad. So, if someone in your kind of hard to diagnose with many high functioning autistics and lack of emotional recognition without directly asking them key questions. Sure, absolutely, Jan. If someone you know in your life builds up to you to be an idol and threatens to cause themselves physical or mental harm under emotional abuse of BPD. That could happen, Lyrids. Are you asking what you should do if that happens? There's a muscle that can put something out of your mind, and with too much it can get worn down into a nub. Yeah, and then you get into numbing, and numbing's not very healthy. And all right, Johnny, have a great night. Thank you for being here, Johnny. Stop scratching. I know, Victoria. I know it's awful, and it's probably really distracting, and I know you guys can hear it. My eczema's horrible right now. It's a curse. It's an absolute curse. Oy, oy, oy. So Lyrid, I think if I read into what you're asking, Lyrid, is what do you do? You set boundaries, and if you have to, you call 911 if you have to, or you encourage that person to go to an emergency room or to call a hotline or their therapist in some circumstances, Lyrid. But I think it's important to recognize when something like that is being used manipulatively and to have boundaries with it. Oh, God, I wish, Sammy, I would be the first to sign up for it. Eczema is truly one of the banes of my existence. I hate eczema so much. Scratch myself constantly. All right, Gappy. Have a good night. I appreciate you being here, Gappy. It's always awesome to have you. I could be diagnosed with borderline, maybe. So can my boyfriend. Both cases aren't severe. So there can be features of borderline that people have, Bonnie, without a person being diagnosed as borderline. Like, I mean, again, this is an effort to basically take a human experience and throw it into a box, and that's not very easy to do. So, I mean, a person could have 2 or 3 of these, and that just be part of their experience. Doesn't mean that you're diagnosed with borderline. Doesn't mean, like, and you know, maybe that person could benefit from dialectical behavioral therapy, Bonnie. You know, it just really depends. I think sometimes the diagnosis is just helpful because it can help people kind of have an understanding of the way that it's understood and what we do, right? Like, you can kind of, like, you can read all this stuff, and there's all this, again, prevalence. You know, population prevalence, 1.6% to 5.9%. Boy, 5.9% feels high. But, you know, so we're not talking about a high prevalence of people who are diagnosed with borderline. It's the same thing that I say all the time about gaming disorder. Gaming disorder is super rare, as is borderline. So people can have the features of a particular diagnosis without actually carrying the diagnosis. Lyrina, I used to live on that stuff. I used to put cortisone cream on my entire body every morning when I got out of the shower, and I got so tired of doing that. My dermatologist also told me that was a bad idea. More so, I'm just curious. My ex struggled with abandonment issues for most of her early childhood. When we got together in a relationship and she got used to being in one, she built me up to be the idol she wanted. Whenever I tried to set boundaries in the relationship or convince her to get help, she'd always shoot it down. Whenever I talked about us taking a break, so she had time to work on her issues, she'd always freak out and say she can't lose me. Yeah, Lyrid, that sounds like the experience of I can't diagnose that person, your ex, but that sounds like the way people describe being in a relationship with somebody who is diagnosed with borderline. And that's the thing. So, Lyrid, what you bring up there is a really cool point, and it's kind of something that I want to mention in terms of the way that it can be filtered into this, is suggesting to a person with borderline that they have borderline or that they go seek treatment is often filtered through the abandonment lens, in the sense that if you're telling me that I have this thing, or if you're telling me I have to go to therapy, you're telling me I have a thing that you might potentially hate so much that you would leave me. That's how deep it goes. Like, basically what you're telling that person is, I'm giving this person a reason for me to leave them. And that can feel like an impenetrable wall sometimes. My friend with BPD is doing a social rehabilitation therapy where a group effectively just has quiet days out together. Is that considered a common BPD treatment? Not that I've heard of, Sammy, but it doesn't mean it isn't. I've not heard of that, though. With your stream tonight, I've been thinking if she had something like BPD. Perhaps, Lyrid, and if that brings you some peace, I'm glad to hear that. You can be very all or nothing. Or you take any steps to stay on top of a situation because it's the only way to avoid confronting their BPD. Absolutely. I do have a natural remedy for eczema in case you would want to try it. I would translate it for you. Helped my sister with her skin disease. You know what, Bonnie? I'm willing to try just about anything. So, Bonnie, if you could send that to me through Discord, I would love it. You noticed a thing, therefore I'm defective. There you go, Carrillo. Absolutely. What could someone with BPD do to help live with their condition? That's a great question, Bloody, and that's going to take me to the next part here, which is to talk about kind of dialectics and dialectical behavior therapy. What's A-Red? Oh, my God. Cheers, A-Red. Welcome in. So good to see you, man. It's been a while. Good to see you, man. So what are the ways that we treat this? So Marsha Linehan, who I mentioned already, is somebody who is diagnosed with borderline, and she developed a modified form of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I'm going to talk about on lesson plan night in a couple weeks, called dialectical behavior therapy. Hey, all right, you know what? Sorry, can I get a cheers? Happy birthday, A-Red. Thank you for spending it with me. I appreciate you telling us. Cheers to A-Red. Happy birthday. Makes sense as to why my past friend would always claim she had dealt with a bunch of her issues when it didn't sound like she even had the resources to do so. She probably felt like I would reject her if she was still struggling. There you go, M-Dash. You did get the orange can, A-Red. So, okay. So dialectical behavioral therapy is, again, it's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. And essentially what it does is it gets a person into dialectics. Dialectics being kind of the idea that there are two opposing ways to view a certain thing, or two opposing experiences that a person can have. It's totally fine, A-Red. Two opposing experiences that a person can have. And what dialectical behavioral therapy tries to do is it tries to take each end of the pole and try and pull into the gray area. And so the idea behind this is that when a person with borderline has a sense, like has an impulsivity comes about, or they have a really strong disturbance in identity and emotion, whatever it might be, that what happens is we have that experience and then we immediately make meaning out of it. Commonly for a person with borderline, the idea is, this person is leaving me, right? Or I'm awful, or like this person's leaving me or they're not leaving me, right? Like that is this very black and white thing. And so what a dialectical behavioral therapist is going to try and do is, one, help a person build a level of distress tolerance so that when they initially get the spike in anxiety or emotional dysregulation as the result of feeling like they're going to be abandoned, is to help a person build a level of distress tolerance around that, to be able to sit in how awful that feels and not do anything for a second, and then to think, what is the way that this situation has been split? And what are the ways that we can evaluate both of those things, both possibilities? And then what is the way that we can kind of draw us towards the middle ground? It's adult onset behavior, Karuo, because at the point that a person becomes an adult, a person has a more fully formed prefrontal cortex that they theoretically have the ability to use in a given circumstance. And if a person is an adult, is not able to engage their prefrontal cortex to be able to do some of this dialectical stuff that I'm talking about, that's where you start to see kind of the onset of this. That you would look at an adult and be like, we wouldn't really expect you to be struggling so much with identity anymore. We wouldn't really expect you to be struggling so much with impulsivity and sort of affective instability. We would expect you to have a stronger sense of self. And so when these things are not present in an adult, that's where we're really starting to look at this. And development is a really good way to understand this in that sense. So yes, so dialectical behavioral therapy. Wait, can you give an example of what DBT might look like in therapy? I absolutely can. Hold on, hang tight for a second, y'all. I just need to check something real quick. Hang tight. I will absolutely give you that. Sorry, hang on. Thanks, Twitch face. If you're being serious, appreciate it. If you're not being serious, whatever, still something nice for you to say. Okay. Hang tight. Sorry, I'm checking something that is not something that I can talk about directly, but okay. Okay, sorry. All right, had to get that squared away there. How into forensic psychology are you? Not super into it, Twitch. I don't really do any forensic psych stuff. So I'm not really it's not into the psychology of killers and all that stuff. I don't do a ton with that. Wow, what's up, Thedian? Okay, so can you give an example of what DBT might look like in therapy? Okay, so an example would be, let's say a person comes in and they're talking about a friend who, we're going to use the example of I have a friend who said that they wanted to hang out with other people. Okay, so if you're doing a level of DBT with this, when the person says, so I have this friend that I think is being a complete asshole and I don't trust and all this stuff. You might be like, okay, well, like what's up? And you're like, well, they don't seem to care about me anymore, as indicated by the fact that they're hanging out with other people. So when that person has that emotional experience there in the moment where they start to kind of freak out and be like, this person's so awful, what we're doing is we're going to look at the cognition that the person has. So Like, this person is horrible and hates me, for example. And then what we're going to do is look at, okay, like, what's on the other end of the spectrum? Okay, the other end of the spectrum might be this person doesn't really feel really anything about you. They've just made a decision to go hang out with somebody else. And that has nothing to do with you, right? So there's a dialectic there. And then so let's hold those two things at once. Okay, so let's explore this one. What would it mean if this person hates you? What would it mean if this person really wasn't thinking much about you? They were just kind of doing what they have to do. Okay, and then let's add some context, and how do you want to navigate that? So what might it mean if maybe this person doesn't hate you, maybe they're a little bit irritated with you, or maybe they just need some space from you, and maybe they're setting a healthy boundary. And let's look at it as potentially this person is setting a healthy boundary with me, and that they're able to have other people in their life that they can hang out with. That does not mean that they are abandoning me or that they don't like me. It just means that they set a boundary with me that is healthy, and it means that they could potentially come back. And you can imagine that doing that is not going to be very easy to do when you're completely riled up and you're flustered and you're dysregulated, which is why we have to build the distress tolerance first. It's part of my goal, Twitch, is to not look like a conventional therapist. Because I think therapy is something that everybody should be able to have access to. Mental health information is something that everybody should feel like they have access to. And so that's part of my whole deal here, Twitch, is to try and make sure that I seem more accessible than if I was sitting here wearing a suit. Because that would totally suck. I'm not about that. I'm sort of anti-establishment with that. Who says a therapist can't be cool? Amen to that. I'm not going to self-proclaim for me to be cool, but like that's kind of my idea behind it. Wait, I super struggle with impulse control, like a lot. I've eaten 2 to 3 calorie meals, binge game for 10 hours. I generally have to remove things from my environment completely. Can't control things that trigger endorphins. Any place to start tracking down that behavior pattern? I don't have a strong sense of self either. Drive for life. So, Fame, I think maybe making a record of it, seeing the data for it is really helpful. If you are diagnosed with it, talking to a therapist about it and being open about it. First of all, I really appreciate that you would feel comfortable enough to share that here, because that's really cool. And that can be really distressing. And so working with a therapist to kind of work through that impulse control, to be able to stop and build some distress tolerance, is probably a way that you might navigate that, Fame. Fair enough, Sammy. To each their own. Oh, man. Thank you for the follow, Sable. I appreciate it very much. Welcome in. By the way, to anybody who's new here, who's watching, I appreciate the follows. It means a lot. It gives me motivation to keep doing what I'm doing. This is a really wonderful community. This isn't just about me. This is about how amazing the people who hang out in here are. It's a very supportive place. So, it's cool. I feel like it's really hard to trust accrediting bodies and certification. But yeah, it would be cool to have personal experience to demonstrate competence as well. What do you mean, Kuro? Nothing conventional about her method of therapy. She tries to be pragmatic but animated. Failure there. It's been on my to-do list to find help. The truth is, those who struggle the most struggle just as hard to get that help. But I never give up. Well, you know what? Cheers, Fame, for never giving up. I give you a lot of credit for that. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard to find people and to find help. I hate that it's hard. How do you gift a sub via the phone Twitch app? I have no idea, A-Red. I wish I did, but I have no idea. Maybe somebody in here knows. How can you tell a therapist who generally wants to help you compared to one that will just diagnose you with whatever and tell you to take some pills? Good question, Bloody. A therapist who's going to just diagnose you and tell you to take some pills is going to tell you to do that probably pretty immediately if that's the case. But I think what's going to be hard is, I think that's why it's important to look at like your initial phone call and stuff, Bloody. So, like, for example, again, I'm going to post this again just because I think it's important. That video talks about it, but you get vibes off of people's profiles and off of the way that you talk to them on the phone. And I think if a person's trying to, a therapist is going to be boundaried with how long they let you talk on the phone when you first call them. So don't get me wrong when I say this, but like if it seems like they're trying to get you off the phone, it seems like they're trying to get you in and out, you're going to get a vibe that they're not going to want to actually listen. I will say that the majority of therapists generally want to help. Okay, so like it's not like a 50-50 shot. But unfortunately it does happen. But I think it's really important to like know what questions you want to ask, to be able to kind of get a good vibe off of a person's profile and off of the phone call, to kind of know what questions you want to ask. And honestly, Bloody, if you said that on the phone call, the right therapist is going to say to you, I care. I'm not going to shove that on you. Like that's not my deal here. And a person who is going to do that might get really defensive on the phone, in which case you're going to have some nice information there. Also, you can always ask if the person's willing to give a free consult, like a quick 15 to 30 minute consultation to see if it's a good fit, and you can maybe get a sense of it there too, Bloody. You should dress up as Freud for Halloween this year. Can't think of anything scarier. Sammy, were you here on Halloween this year when I put a suit and tie on? Or I didn't put a tie on, I don't think. I put a suit on though for Halloween for like half the stream. It was ridiculous. By the way, what's up, Leeds? You missed that, yeah. Therapists can't prescribe. I can't prescribe medication, right? That's the other thing, Neuro. Thank you for saying that, Neuro. Well, thank you, Anonymous Gifter. Yeah, I can't prescribe medication. I can diagnose, but I can't prescribe medication. A psychiatrist or a general practitioner is who can do that. So you're probably pretty safe on the medication front, Bloody, if you go to a couple and family therapist or a clinical psychologist. DBT is about seeing the extreme of BPD and trying to reason with it. What if at the extreme your BPD, you're nowhere near able to even get to therapy? I'm not sure. What do you mean, Lemon? In terms of impulse control, there is a really interesting insight into it called the marshmallow test. There are also methods to exercise delayed gratification in order to build power motivational capacity. I've never heard, maybe I've heard of the marshmallow test and not heard of it referred to that way, Zoiku. Zoiku, do you have a way to send me the information on that? I'd be interested to read it and see if it's something I'm actually familiar with. Part of back and forth of finding a therapist and building alliance. There's no way to know from a list of qualified professionals that's true. It's all about the personality. And there you go, Neuro. Absolutely. Anna! Oh my god. Happy New Year, Anna. Sorry, I'm so excited. Hello, Anna. Nice to see you. Lime Drop. Awkward question. I talked to a therapist who implied BPD was almost exclusively present in victims of sexual assault. Just wondering if you have a knee-jerk reaction to that. That's not always the case, Lime Drop. It's common, but it doesn't mean that is the case. So I appreciate you asking the question. It is often linked to some level of trauma. It's certainly linked to a chaotic attachment, but it doesn't mean that there has to be sexual abuse or sexual assault present at Lime Drop. That would be my reaction to that. He took off his hat. I did. I'm not going to say it, but it will get better over time because that would be a presumption of me to say that, and it really kind of shocked me. I didn't expect it. It's kind of cool that they would say that. Dr. Mick, what do you think about ethical disclosure obligations and what the threshold should be? In Australia, it's serious risk of harm to yourself or others, or admitting it's a serious intention to commit an indictable offense with a maximum penalty of 5 years. Do you think that threshold is appropriate, or should it be lower or higher? Honestly, Twitch, that's not really on me to comment on. I kind of go with what I have to go with. It sounds like Australia is very similar to the United States. The United States, it depends on the state that you're in. That's a really delicate matter. One that I don't know that I could just give like a real quick and dirty answer to. There's a lot that goes into how that gets determined and what that means and all of that stuff. So I apologize if that's not an answer you were hoping for. I think anything that keeps a person safe is probably the best course of action. So you said DBT is about trying to shorten the pull. I assume that's an analogy for seeing the extreme of your condition and trying to shorten the pull. So it's not about the condition so much, Lemon, as it's about the context or the content of what's being talked about or the situation. So it's not, I have borderline, I don't have borderline, and let's find the middle there. It's, I acknowledge that I have borderline. Here's an event that happened or a situation that arose, and I need to see it in two opposing ways in order to be able to find the middle ground. Honestly, the process of doing that is almost more important than the actual polls. It's to just get a person to slow down and to try and think about context and to not act immediately on the fear of abandonment. And to realize that more often than not, it's not a case of you're going to be abandoned. It's that there's other context that goes into this. The filter that you're seeing it through is the fear of abandonment. So I think that's an important distinction, Lemon. What if you went to talk? Wait, so I tried to be here in the holidays, but thanks to my sleep schedule, I was never awake when the stream was on. It's all right, Anna. I'm just glad you're here now. Hey, Dr. Mick, what if you want to talk about something with your therapist, but you're worried they're going to put you in a hospital because it could involve law, because of it, or could involve or get law enforcement involved? It's a good question, Bloody. It depends on context, so I don't know how, I don't know there's a lot I could say here. I think something that's really important to know is that just talking about something like suicide is not immediately going to lead to a therapist calling the police or having you go to the hospital. If you talk about suicide or you talk about something like that and then you're willing to engage in a safety plan and kind of work through the assessment and work with the therapist, that's going to be good. Hospital and law enforcement being involved is really only going to happen if there's, depending on the state, okay? So don't take this with a grain of salt. Depending on the state you're in and the type of therapist you're seeing, that's going to depend on what you're talking about and how immediate the threat to whatever it is that's threatened is. But you have patient-client confidentiality, again, depending on state, in that exchange, Bloody. Do you think there's a way to help someone you suspect has BPD to recognize this and seek therapy? It's an awesome question, Sable. I really appreciate that question. First of all, I think it's really important to pad that with acknowledging that you are not abandoning that person by pointing it out. I think is super important, that it's coming out of a space of love and it's coming out of a space of warmth and tenderness, which might sound kind of like cliche, but it's totally true. And then honestly, being willing to go with that person to therapy might make the difference, Sable. But it needs to come from a place of I'm on your side, this isn't because I'm abandoning you, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's really important. Awesome. Thank you, Zoiku. I appreciate that very much. What's up, Gabe? So I gotta admit, I betrayed the team. I bought cans of Perrier instead of LaCroix. That's all right. I approve of Perrier, Victoria. So you're good in my book. So it's not looking at the extreme conditions of your BPD can put you in. Can only try to change my future BPD conditions by using past therapy and old actions taken from me and what went wrong. Yeah, it's Lemon. It's how do you handle various situations that come up knowing that you have borderline. So it's not, certain extreme conditions that your borderline puts you in for sure, because borderline will put people in some difficult positions, but it's more how do you navigate a given situation in the moment. Oh, so it was A-Red. Or wait, no, it wasn't A-Red. No, I don't know who it was. Well, that's cool. Whoever the anonymous was, that's cool. By the way, what's the little video running on the top? It's Journey, Anna. I was kind of playing Journey while I was talking here, but I realized that it's very difficult for me to talk and play Journey at the same time. It seems to me like Destiny is the only game that I can literally just play and chat at the same time and have absolutely no problem with. The chat's just so engaging tonight that playing the game takes my concentration away from it. This game is fabulous, though, Anna. You absolutely should play it. A couple of years ago, I cut ties with my friend who is probably undiagnosed BPD. I sometimes wonder if that was the right thing to do because of how integral rejection is to BPD. BPD is very easily manipulative in that relationship and at some level traumatized by it. So M-, here's the thing. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep somebody warm is a saying that I love very much. And having boundaries that are healthy and clear for you is an important thing. So it's that other person is accountable for themselves. So I hope you don't give yourself too much of a hard time by that, because if they're boundaries that you set in good faith towards yourself, I think that's really important. Yeah, exactly, Lyrid. I can play Destiny in my sleep. Can't play Journey in my sleep. What do you think of Bungie and Activision cutting ties and taking Destiny? I hope it works out, Anna. I really hope that Bungie is now free from the chains of Activision and that they make the game that they want to make. But I don't know. Bungie's a different company than it was when they were making Halo. I met the character designer for Journey. They were very inspiring and actually made a whole Adventure Time episode by themselves. That's super cool. Thanks for the info. That was very helpful in letting me know how DBT works. You're welcome, Lemon. You are absolutely welcome. So there's really, what I want to say about DBT really quickly is there are 4 things that are happening when a person is going through DBT, or when people are going through DBT. Also, DBT often happens in groups. Like, you can go to group therapy and talk with other people who are diagnosed with borderline. That can be really helpful. It's a common way that it's done. But there's 4 things that DBT is trying to accomplish. As I already said once, you're trying to build distress tolerance, right? So how do you deal with crises in a more effective way without having to resort to like problematic behaviors? So again, when we were talking here about potentially self-damaging, is how do we build your distress tolerance so that you can hang in there and then decide to act in a way that is not going to harm you? So self-harm, suicide, etc. Okay. How do we help you engage in interpersonal relationships in a way that is more effective? How do you ask for things that you need? A lot of times people with borderline think that if they ask for something, it's just going to make people mad at them and that their needs aren't important. That's not true. Okay. How do you say no to other people? A lot of times people with borderline have really poor boundaries and will go out of their way to do things for others because they're worried if they don't that those other people will leave them. So that's another important thing to know. Okay. So how do you maintain your own self-respect in your important relationships, but how do you say no? How do you know when to say yes? How do you ask for things? How do we build up your ability to regulate your emotions and to sort of understand them, be aware of them, build up cognitive tolerance and kind of new ways of having self-talk around your emotions so that you can regulate them more effectively? And then how can we engage you in some level of mindfulness so that you can kind of be in the present, right? Rather than being distracted by being worried about things that have happened in the past and things that could potentially happen in the future. How do we get you in the here and now and help you have some agency over what happens in the here and now? Did I ever play Nier Automata yet? No, I have not. I saw a video on that, Anna, but I didn't get to watch a lot of it. Burnout and gaslighting, not only from the person with BPD, but yourself, is hard to deal with. Absolutely. Sounds like this could really easily apply to a person's job, too. Sure, it sure could. Before I realized how my impulsive was damaging my lifestyle, I thought of the path as the scenic, longer route, which I'm starting to realize enabled these problems. BPD can definitely make your life seem active. Sure can. It can be really, it's really distressing to live with. Like, imagine for a second, like whether you're diagnosed with borderline or not, I want you to imagine for a second that most everything that you experience on the day-to-day is filtered through, will I be abandoned? Like, that gets really distressing. And we as humans don't want to be isolated. We want to be in relationship. We want to be close to others. For people with borderline, it's often that closeness has been associated with pain and with abandonment and with isolation. And that's a really horrible cognitive dissonance to have to sit with. It's brutal. And so what happens is people find maladaptive coping strategies for this, including hurting themselves, and manipulating and all this stuff, and it's just trying to figure out what are healthier ways that we can deal with that, and DBT seeks to try and help with that. And I know I've said this on stream before, but I really am actively trying to find a colleague who does DBT. I have several colleagues who do DBT. I'd love to get one of them on the stream to interview them about DBT. That is something that I'm still actively trying to do. Oh, I'm sure, Anna. There's actually, Anna, in the Discord right now, there's you can vote for the next story-driven game that I'm going to play. I don't have Nier on there, but there are some good ones. I think we'll be able to, even with work on degree, qualifies for it. Getting a PhD is hard, Fame. It's absolutely brutal, so I totally hear you on that. It also makes you more likely to be abandoned. I spent 6 months of the year on the streets. Honestly, being at rock bottom showed me the true fear of BPD. I came out alive. That has helped my distress tolerance and abandonment of so much. Man, Lemon. Seriously, Lemon, you're awesome for sharing this stuff. Like, I'm sorry you had that experience, but my God, that will absolutely build up distress tolerance. And yeah, I mean, that's the problem, is it can lead to a really nasty self-fulfilling prophecy, which is that you expect that people are going to leave you, so you cling really tightly. People then think you're clingy. People set boundaries. You think you're being abandoned. You abandoned. They get pissed. And then all of a sudden, people have left you. And the thing about expectations is if you put too much focus into one expectation and you prepare for people to leave you, that's the only thing you're ever prepared for. And so oftentimes it's actually distressing when people do not abandon somebody who is diagnosed with borderline, because they have never expected that that's going to happen. And people do not like when their experiences don't align with their expectations. I went to Billard's bar thing near my house and used my B-Day as an icebreaker conversation, made a few friends. Awesome, A-Red. I have to be up early for work tomorrow, so I'm going to lurk and probably fall asleep. Good night, everybody. I'm trying to make more of your streams live, but regardless, have a great rest of your stream. A-Red, I appreciate it. I'm just glad you're here now. No pressure to have to be here every night. Happy birthday, buddy. I hope you sleep well. I'm really glad, really glad you stopped by tonight. I'll check that out once your stream is over. I really missed this stream. I've missed you too, Anna. It's good to have you back tonight. Is that filter you were talking about solely about the fear of abandonment? Yeah, Leeds, like, I mean, it's not only that, but I think it's just kind of a way to help make sense of what it is that we're talking about with borderline. That fear of abandonment just contextualizes so many things. Sounds exactly like my last relationship. There you go. I often have a friend who's isolating herself, abandoning me, even though I've been there for 14 years. It was better when I was homeless. At least I was productive. Oof. Oh my God, Poopity. Hello, it has definitely been a while. I'm so glad to see you and to read that wonderful name you have. Having a relationship think it's on the edge causes me. Yep. Okay, there we go. All right, Twitch. Thanks, man. Or gal, or they, or whoever you are. Very kind of you to say. My fiance would agree. By the way, finally, kind of the last piece I'll say about DBT. I know I've only scratched the surface on DBT, but kind of the final part I'll say is that crisis coaching through the phone is part of DBT. And one of the ways that happens is oftentimes people who treat people with bipolar specifically through DBT will have a phone handy, and they will, when the person with borderline is in crisis, they will call the therapist, and the therapist will walk them through kind of the DBT skills as a way to scaffold that process so that eventually they can do it on their own, but they get a little bit of help up front. Actually only on because I'm sick and have to stay in bed. Oh no. Oh my God. I'm sorry, Anna. That sounds very distressing. I'm really sorry you're having that experience. Would it be abandonment issues that cause a person to be horrid to their partner as a sort of defense mechanism? Yeah, Sable. So like that could absolutely be part of it, right? Like I'm going to be nasty to you because I think you're going to abandon me, so it'll be easier to be abandoned if I'm angry. It's way easier, by the way, to leave people when you're angry than it is when you're sad or whatnot. Like, but yes, that could be a way to sort of sabotage or to abandon up front or whatever it might be. Talking on the phone, not for me. Yeah, not for everybody, Kuro. Sometimes it's through text as well. Something like that would be wonderful when I have anxiety attacks. Sure, absolutely, Gerbo. I hear you on that. So again, just to reiterate, one, tonight is not for anybody in here to diagnose themselves. That's not the point of this. It's just to kind of give you some information for how to identify it. If you have a loved one who has borderline, or you suspect might have borderline, just remember that it's probably very torturous for that person, that person already deals with a lot of stigma around it, and that the prognosis is really good so long as you can help that person find help, and that there's probably a fear of abandonment and even pointing it out to that person, so be mindful of that in the way that you approach it. That if you do suspect that you have this and you do get diagnosed with it, that the prognosis is great so long as you can engage in something like DBT. Because once a person knows that they have this, they can learn very well how to manage it and how to improve their quality of life. So this is not the big, horrible, awful monster that people make it out to be. People with borderline are not the most horrifically manipulative people in the world. They're just trying to make sure that the people they love and the people that matter to them don't leave. Because ultimately they want connection. It's just kind of a maladaptive way of connecting, and so that's what therapy is for. So there is absolutely no shame in being diagnosed with this. And I really hope, I don't know, it's a shame to me that it carries such a horrible stigma right now. How do we manage someone's abandonment feelings? So, Lyrna, acknowledging the fear is really important. You can acknowledge a fear and also hold your own boundaries. It is really important to not lose your own sense of self and your own boundaries in the vortex of borderline. Like, it's okay to set boundaries with a person who's borderline. It's okay to explain your boundaries, but you also don't have to over-explain them. You can just acknowledge that there's a fear there. And sometimes just hearing, hey, I'll be back. I'm not abandoning you, sometimes can be enough. So just knowing that it's there, Lyrna, and then kind of making a determination. If this is a person who I want to have a relationship and maintain connection with, this is the thing that I probably need to acknowledge for them. And you can still have boundaries. And I would say that it's very healthy to have those. How do I stop myself not believing it in 4 days? Wish I could help you, Lemon, with that. Watch the video on demand, Lemon. Dr. Beautiful Mick of the Cluster B personality disorders. Are you talking about HPD, histrionic personality disorders, the one that gets the least attention? You say that there's a significant amount of overlap with BPD and NPD? Wait, NPD or HPD are you talking about, Twitch? You find it a useful diagnosis. Whether a diagnosis is useful, I think, is really only insofar as it allows a person to feel some level of relief about what's going on for them, and also to be able to help a therapist have some level of treatment planning. So usefulness, I sort of quantify that way. And there are overlap in personality disorders, absolutely, Twitch. And that's why a person needs to kind of have an assessment done to see what diagnostic criteria they fit. Does the therapist concur with that? That sort of thing. And it often does, Victoria. It absolutely does. I feel like I understand this much better now. I'm really glad to hear that. Really, really, really glad to hear that, M-Dash. If only governments held the idea about diagnoses. I know. But hopefully with more awareness of borderline and kind of taking a more sensitive view to it, it'll stop being as stigmatized as it is. I say there's no shame in it. It is exhausting, though. It's exhausting for the person who's diagnosed with it. It's exhausting for the people around that person. And it can be exhausting for therapists. I really think that therapists who do DBT and who specialize in working with borderline are really some of the most patient, wonderful people out there. I don't know, Twitch. I don't know why I did that. Chatbot can be a little bit of a pain in the ass sometimes. But they really are some of the most wonderful people out there, and I really appreciate the work they do, which is why I want to get one on the stream so that they can talk about it and you can hear it from somebody and they can answer more questions that you might have about this. Oh, I know it was Fame. It was terrible. Does bipolar and borderline have a lot of crossover? Yes, it does, Immune. And that's where a mental health practitioner can help a person differentiate and figure out which one it is. So, yes, there is a lot of crossover. Is posting clips from the stream okay? Absolutely, Gerbo. You just got to get permission from a mod if you're going to post a clip from the stream. You're welcome to do that. You're also welcome to post them in Discord under stream highlights. I welcome that very much. Yeah, that's what my mom does, Lyrina. My mom works in a life care facility. And she is one of the most patient, wonderful people I know. My mom rocks. She would be fun to have. I don't know if she'd come on stream, but she would be fun to have on stream to talk about what it's like to work in a life care facility. So with that said, if a person with possible BPD totally refuses to seek any help and their partner becomes totally exhausted, is there a nice way to leave? Stating your boundaries, stating why. If you're worried that the person might react to the point that they could cause harm to themselves or somebody else, you could certainly get police involved with that if you needed to. So, ultimately you have to hold a person accountable, Sable, if it's an adult. So, I wish I could, Twitch. You have to check availability in the U.S., but there you go. Good luck with it. Thank you, Bonnie. Super cool of you. Literally a leader, pioneer, innovator in mental health and well-being by doing this kind of thing and using our modern social technology. Well, that is a huge compliment, Fame, that I don't take lightly, and I really appreciate you saying that, and I really do hope to grow this channel. I don't know if VIPs can, Thidian, but I really do hope to grow this channel. By the way, for anybody that's new here, kind of a fun fact about this stream is I'm actually going to be on ABC News 2020 because of the stream, so I'm excited about that. But Fame, tell your friends. Like everybody here, tell people about this. I love having new and wonderful people in here to go along with the long-standing amazing people that are in here. This is a wonderful, wonderful place. It really is, Proto. I totally agree. And sometimes you gotta, if you're worried. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do and be able to follow through with your boundaries and take, like I said, you can't set yourself on fire to keep somebody warm. Not healthy. When am I going to be on it? Lyrid in February, probably, is my guess. You helped me get through my day a bit lighter. Thank you. You're very welcome, Sable. That means a lot for me to hear. It really does. I will, Gerbo. I had actually thought about trying to do like a watch party. I don't know if I'll be able to do that, but I will. You believe me, you will all know when it happens. Absolutely. Thank you, Fame. I appreciate it very much. Ban that man. Yeah, Proto posted Google. Can we watch a clip of the news on stream when it's over? Absolutely, Bonnie. I would love to do that. Well, thank you, Lemon. I appreciate that. You all are too kind. And again, if you're new here, if you've been lurking, I really appreciate that you're here. I love my lurkers as much as I love the people that talk in chat. I do appreciate follows. It tells me I'm on the right track and that I'm doing good things. And then that way you can know when I'm doing more of these. I do mental health topic nights every week. And actually, if you join the Discord, you can vote on which topic I talk about each week. And right now, every Wednesday, I do what's called Lesson Plan Night. And so actually tomorrow night, we're going to talk about how strategic family therapy. So that's a model of therapy, a theory of change, and I'm going to talk about how to do that. So that's on the docket for tomorrow. By the way, oh my God, I cannot believe I didn't say this at the beginning of the stream. Tomorrow at 6 o'clock Central Time, I'm going to be on with Anxiety. I'm going to be on her stream. So I'm super pumped about that. It's the second time I'm going to be on her stream. So and I'm going to be talking about, hold up. What am I going to be talking about? We talked about a bunch of ideas. I'm going to be talking about how problem narratives develop, how to see yourself empowered against your own struggles, and how to change your self-talk. I'm going to be talking about that with her. So she's going to be hitting me up with all sorts of questions and stuff. So make sure that you check out Anxiety tomorrow because I'm going to be on with her. Who said Twitch face? I want to see you play a game. Twitch, I play games all the time on stream. And actually on Thursday, I'm going to start the next story game, which right now on the poll, God of War is still leading. So God of War might be the next story game that we play. And Subnautica on Saturday, Proto, absolutely. Subnautica Saturday's back. Will you post it on your Discord? Not like those folks you meet in those Louisianas. Yeah. Will you post it on your Discord? I will. Yes, Larry, I absolutely will. How's rent over there these days? How's rent? Rent in Chicago sucks, Kuro. Wait, can a mod do an SO for her? What do you mean, Sable? I might have missed something. Watch as CBS wants to record you again on Saturday. Yeah, right? It's ABC. If CBS wants to come join me, they can do that too. But right now it's ABC. Oh, okay. Joking about moving to Australia. I've never been to Australia, but I would love to go, Kuro. Shout out. Link to her stream. Oh, here, I'll do one. I'm gonna be on with her tomorrow at 6 o'clock Central Time. Really don't do well with unstable interpersonal relationships, which sometimes gets tough when doing typical therapy methods don't get through, which goes back to her time as instructing naval aviators. Yeah, that can be a struggle, Nero, for sure. I would go. I hope I got too much crap that wants to kill you in seconds over there on that island of doom. You talking about Subnautica, Floret? All right, so I'm going to sign off because I got to get up early tomorrow, as usual. But I want to say before I go a couple things. One, you are all wonderful. Like, I'm moved every night by the fact that all of you hang out with me, that you spend your time with me, that you care enough about this stuff to want to watch and to want to engage about it. I love your questions. I love just all of you are so wonderful. You are part of my self-care. I love being here every night. So thank you for being awesome. This channel really did blow up a lot faster than I thought it was ever going to. But thank you for believing in what I do and for being here and for being part of the wonderfulness that is this community. For those of you that if you're new here and you liked this, if you shoot me a follow, I'm on every night. You get notifications for when I come online. Join the Discord. Wonderful things in the Discord. There's lots of cool threads. There's a lot of support there, a lot of resources. It's a really cool place, so I totally encourage you to join. But seriously, you guys are awesome. And for those who are new, you haven't heard me say this yet, but for those who have, I'm going to, as I always say before I sign off, and I mean it every single time I say it, every time I say it, to all of you, each and every one of you. You matter. Your experiences are valid. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. And I really do hope that you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Tomorrow's lesson plan night, and tomorrow I'm on with Anxiety, so you get to double dip with me tomorrow if you happen to catching Anxiety stream as well. But I really look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night for lesson plan night. Thank you for being here, and I cannot wait to see you tomorrow. So, adios, y'all. Appreciate you.